He rose from languishing poverty in the cane fields of Penal and Faizabad to become one of the most successful and influential businessmen and legislators of the 1920s in Trinidad and Tobago. But what makes Timothy Roodal's success really stand out is not only his unique rags to riches story, but more so the fact that he never lost touch with his roots among the peasant class from which his indentured laborer parents had emerged. Historical researcher Angelo Bisesa Singh has made a comprehensive study of the life of Timothy Roodal.
When one considers the background that he came from, he was born as the son of indentured immigrants at the Bonaccord estate in Pointe-a-Pierre in 1885 in an environment that treated the emigrant East Indian as alien, so that there were few avenues open to him for upward mobility, either socially or economically. So that when one considers that very humble genesis compared to the heights which he aspired to and the heights of which he achieved in becoming a member of the Legislative Council and becoming one of the wealthiest men in the colony, one has to appreciate how much he put into it, and that he was indeed, as categorically as can be said for anybody, a resounding success.
Timothy Roodal was born in Pointe-a-Pierre in 1885 to parents Timothy Sau Roodal and Rukminia Roodal. He was the third of 9 children, and with his parents having converted from Hinduism to Presbyterianism, the young Timothy was able to benefit from the early rise of the Presbyterian schools, particularly in South Trinidad. First, he became a pupil teacher. Then, through the influence of Dr. K.G. Grant, the head of the Canadian mission in South Trinidad, he was able to gain 5 years of free tuition at Naparima College. But even in his early years, Timothy Roodal took a leaning towards business and trade. In 1903, he left school to get married to Juliana Bhagwan Singh of the well-known Bhagwan Singh hardware family, who then resided in Penal. Part of the dowry of the marriage was a retail outlet called the Blue Shop that dealt in hardware and dry goods and was typically a small-town enterprise. With his increasing business acumen, Roodal was able to turn the Blue Shop into a dynamic hardware retail outlet, and then decided to expand into other areas of business.
From being a retailer and a wholesaler, he went into the petrochemical industry, which was, at the time, we're talking early 20th century, a very infant industry in itself, in that it dealt mainly with extraction and not refining or any tertiary level association. So that when one considers the very great leap and the bridging of a mighty void from being a small country retailer, a small shop owner, into being an oil magnate, it's very definitive of the man himself, because even then there was not a lot of scope for any colored person to develop as a figurehead in the oil industry.
Although having successfully established what was known as the Roodal oil fields from oil-bearing lands bequeathed to him by his father, Timothy Roodal got out of the oil industry mainly because he had witnessed a horrible and tragic accident involving a close friend and fellow businessman, Bunsey Partap.
Partap was involved also as an East Indian in the oil industry, but was a bit more of a roughneck than Roodal himself, in so much that he had primitive drilling techniques and would frequently cut corners. And that eventually cost him his life and the life of several of his family and several of the community when a well that he drilled in Faizabad exploded. So, learning from the Partap experience, Roodal was able to look ahead beyond petrochemicals into another avenue of trade and industry. And at the point in time, that was the cinema. And there are three names that stand out when one thinks of the cinema in Trinidad, and that would be Tiloxing, Humphrey, and Roodal. Roodal bought cinemas from the father of John Humphrey, William Humphrey, and he expanded the cinemas into a chain so that the cinemas, instead of becoming city-oriented or town-oriented enterprise, they became spread throughout the countryside, and they became known as the Roodal Circuit of Cinemas.
The Roodal Circuit of Cinemas did indeed include such well-known Port of Spain movie houses as Roxy, which surpassed all the other cinemas in its architectural detail, and Royal, which was located on Upper Charlotte Street. Among the cinemas he owned in San Fernando was the Gaiety, which was housed on the upper floor of this building on St. Joseph Road. The ground floor was occupied by a pharmacy and a soap factory, both of which Roodal also owned. Now an acknowledged cinema tycoon, the enterprising Timothy Roodal continued to expand his cinema interests, which soon included holdings in the then British Guyana as well as Barbados.
It was a great leap of faith and a great leap of entrepreneurial skill for Roodal to leave the cane field, to become a small retailer, to become an oil magnate, and then progress into becoming the king of cinemas in Trinidad.
And Timothy Roodal did indeed establish himself as the king of cinemas in this part of the world in the early part of the 20th century. So much so that Western movie legend John Wayne and his wife were sent from Hollywood to Trinidad to be hosted by Timothy Roodal and his wife in 1941. John Wayne, seen here in this photograph with the Roodal clan, had also come to attend the first showing in Trinidad of one of his classic westerns entitled The Bullfighter and the Lady. Now a wealthy businessman with substantial land holdings, Roodal was elected to the Legislative Council in 1928, representing the county of St. Patrick. When the first general elections were held in the colony of Trinidad and Tobago in 1925, only men literate in English, possessing considerable real estate, and earning a high income were eligible to be election candidates. This meant that the members of the working class, be they lower or even middle class, could not qualify to be candidates and were not eligible to vote. The same restrictive conditions applied in 1928 when Roodal contested the elections.
When one thinks of the Legislative Council elections of 1928 and one looks at the slate of candidates and the slate of members, you see Timothy Roodal and Saran Tiloxing as being the pioneers of East Indians in politics in Trinidad. And his success basically was an extension of his own drive for perfection and his own drive for maximization of his resources, in so much that it was misinterpreted at the point in time, but he advocated and was able to press the colonial government into granting a salary for members of the Legislative Council.
Up to that point in the political history of Trinidad and Tobago, the services of the members of the Legislative Council were largely voluntary. So by advocating a salary for members, Roodal was in fact seeking to open the door for less fortunate citizens of the colony to become members of the Legislative Council. But the political interests of Roodal were not limited to the Legislative Council in Port of Spain, to which he was elected in 1928, 1933, 1938, and 1946. He also contributed significantly to the development of local government, having served as a member of the then San Fernando Borough Council for 18 years from 1927 to 1945. The high point of his tenure came when he was appointed mayor of San Fernando in 1942. Roodal's political career would continue to explore new ground, with T.U.B. Butler being the pivotal force behind this exploration. In July 1936, having become involved in trade unionism and championing the cause of workers' rights in the colony, Butler launched the British Empire Workers' and Citizens' Home Rule Party. In the 1946 elections, Roodal contested and again won the St. Patrick's seat, this time as a member of Butler's party. From 1946 to 1948, he would serve as a member of the Executive Council. Of all the elections he contested and won, the 1946 general elections were perhaps the most significant, in that it was the very first held under universal adult suffrage. Roodal was appointed a member of the Constitution Reform Committee, which was set up in 1947. He went on to serve on the Legislative Council for another 4 years up to 1950, when he contested the 1950 elections, again on a Butler Party ticket for the St. Patrick East seat. But this time he was defeated by Ajoda Singh, who gained 4,822 votes against Roodal's 3,390. In 1948, at age 63, Roodal had also resigned from the San Fernando Borough Council. One of his paramount contributions to San Fernando was the creation of the Roodal Cemetery.
Paradise Cemetery in the city of San Fernando was already considered to be an elite burial ground, in that only the wealthy French Creole and the British expatriate planters owned plots there. So basically the poor and the indigent were buried in a plot of land called the Pauper Cemetery on the far end of Broadway. And Roodal thought that it was something that was really distasteful. He thought that it was reminiscent of his own time when he was a deprived East Indian immigrant on our estate, the son of immigrants, so that he fought assiduously for Roodal Cemetery to be regularized. And excuse me, it is to his own credit that he was able to partially fund the development of the cemetery for the people of San Fernando.
Another public acknowledgement of his contribution to the development of San Fernando is this street named after Timothy Roodal. In 1940, Roodal purchased this Port of Spain property on Queen's Park West called the Ambard's House. The purchase price, $24,000. He lived here until his death in 1952. The house was renamed the Roomore, an abbreviation of two family names, Roodal and Morgan. Roodal's very private granddaughter, Dr. Evan Morgan, still lives here. The Roomore is one of the magnificent 7 buildings situated around the Queen's Park Savannah. Despite his extreme wealth and influence, Timothy Roodal never forgot where he came from. He was of a charitable disposition, contributing to numerous causes and ensuring that his benevolence benefited the more unfortunate in the society. Indeed, the Roomore, now standing quietly proud, was the venue for several hectic charitable functions in the 1940s. Timothy Roodal was also one of the early pioneers of the struggle for better working class conditions, which led him to develop an enduring friendship with both Butler and Captain A.A. Cipriani. He did much to abolish child labor on the sugar estates and to introduce both workmen's compensation and old age pensions. The legacy of Timothy Roodal, a man who came from humble beginnings to rise to enormous wealth and influence, is one of the nation's most compelling rags to riches stories. Roodal married and had 2 daughters. He died on February 2nd, 1952, and was buried at the Paradise Cemetery in San Fernando.